In H.P. Lovecraft's story, The Call of Cthulhu, the main ways in which the narrator, and we could call them various protagonists within the story, encounter Cthulhu, other than Johansen and his unfortunate crewmates, we have an account of that, is largely through encountering or reading about the Cthulhu cult, which is a term that the narrator's great uncle is going to use, and then the narrator himself picks up and says, this is very useful for me. So in a way, you could say that there is a singular cult, although it's going to be spread across the world. Or we could say that it's a bunch of local cults that all have one main object in common. And we get a number of instances which may or may not actually be part of or reflective of the cult talked about at the end of part 1. And these are coming from the clippings that Professor Angle, the narrator's great uncle, has accumulated and that the narrator is going through. So we see that there is a theosophist colony donning white robes in California en masse for some glorious fulfillment which never arrives. Items in India speak guardedly of serious native unrest towards the end of March. Voodoo orgies multiply in Haiti. African outposts report ominous mutterings. American officers in the Philippines find certain tribes bothersome about this time. New York policemen are mobbed by hysterical Levantines on the night of March 22nd to 23rd. The west of Ireland is full of wild rumor and legendary. Right? So all of these are potentially connected to the cult, or they could just be reflective of sensitive people being affected by the rise of the city of Relay. So those we're not quite sure about. Ones that we can be completely sure about, in the second part, we have Professor Webb's account of having been on a tour of Greenland and Iceland, seeking runic inscriptions, not finding them, but on the West Greenland coast, encountering a singular tribe or cult of, as he's going to call it, degenerate Eskimos or Inuit, whose religion, a curious form of devil worship, chilled him with its deliberate bloodthirstiness and repulsiveness. The other Inuit don't know much of it, and they mention it with shudders, saying it come down from horribly ancient eons before even the world was made. Is that reflective of the cult, as it's going to turn out? Yes. But it could just be part of the stories that we often see, pre-creation discussions about things. And we find out that they dance around a horrible fetish, a very crude bas-relief of stone comprising a hideous picture and some cryptic writing. Then we discover that, from Inspector Legras, what in substance both the Inuit wizards and the Louisiana swamp priest had chanted to their kindred idols was something very like this, the word divisions being guessed from traditional breaks in the phrase as chanted aloud. And is there any way to properly pronounce this? No. Fnuli mflagen Cthulhu relay wal fatang. And Legras was actually able to say what this means. In his house at Relay, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. So we get a long account of a similar, perhaps the same cult in the Louisiana swamps. Quite a narrative, which we don't have to go into too much, other than bringing up the fact that it's described as having a central bonfire, orgies going on, terrible things, and that there's non-human creatures involved as well. And then we get, in the third part, Johansen's account, which is partly given in a newspaper and partly given by his own writing, We get this account of a armed yacht, the Alert, which encounters the Emma, the boat that he's on, attacks it, and we find that there's a battle, and the entire crew of the Alert is killed. And what's there? Well, this statue of Cthulhu, right? And then we also get the encounter on the very island itself of the city of Relay, and the unleashing of Cthulhu, with a bit of a mistake being made by the crew, resulting in the deaths of all but two of them, one of whom will die a little bit later, only Johansson surviving. And what was going on? The Alert was there, presumably, to trigger the coming of Cthulhu, to open up the vault in which he was held. We also get some discussion of the possibility that the cult worldwide has actually killed some of the people involved, including Professor Engel himself. His grandnephew says, "One thing I began to suspect, which I now fear I know, is that my uncle's death was far from natural. He fell on a narrow hill street leading up from an ancient waterfront swarming with foreign mongrels. After a careless push from a Negro sailor, I did not forget the mixed blood and marine pursuits of the cult members in Louisiana, and would not be surprised to learn of secret methods and poison needles as ruthless and as anciently known as the cryptic rites and belief. Legrasse and his men, it is true, have been left alone, but in Norway a certain seaman who saw things is dead. Might not the deeper inquiries of my uncle, after encountering the sculptor's data, have come to sinister ears? I think Professor Engel died because he knew too much, or because he was likely to learn too much." And then he intimates that maybe this is going to happen to me. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now. We also find that Johansson himself appears to have died under mysterious circumstances as well. During a walk through a narrow lane during the Gothenburg dock, a bundle of papers falling from an attic window had knocked him down. Two Lascar sailors at once helped him to his feet, but before the ambulance could reach him, he was dead. Physicians found no adequate cause for the end and laid it to heart trouble and a weakened constitution, right? So maybe he died of natural causes. Maybe the cult got him. And, towards the end, he says that, if I don't survive, let's get rid of this manuscript. It's, in certain ways, too much trouble for human beings. Now, this is all sort of going around, seeing things, we could say, at second hand. We also get an account of this guy, old Castro, one of the prisoners who's been taken, who supposedly has talked with undying leaders of the cult in the mountains of China. And so he gives an account that goes on for about a page and a half, revealing, kind of an info dump, as we say, what's really happening. So first of all, there's the great old ones, and they are creatures that came down from the stars, brought their images with them. They're not entirely flesh and blood. They don't fit into the dimensions of space and time as we understand them. They're not composed entirely of matter. And they have a strange way of living. They can be dead but not dead, residing in their tombs, speaking with human beings. And this is how the cult arises. When after infinities of chaos the first men came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams. Then the first men formed the cult around small idols, which the great ones showed them, idols brought in dim eras from dark stars. And we read that the cult will never die. So it's been there from the beginning of humanity. It will be there until the end of humanity as well. And what does the cult do? The cult keeps the memories of those ancient ways in shadow forth the prophecy of the return of the old ones through the appropriate rites. Now, the cult can't read the writing on these statues anymore, if they ever could. They also don't know the size of the old ones, or they won't talk about it, right? There's a lot that they're not quite sure about, but this cult is still operative. And interestingly, we are told that Castro said that he thought the center of the cult lay amid the pathless deserts of Arabia, where Irem, the city of pillars, dreams hidden and untouched. He tells us a few other things about this. It's not allied to the European witch cult, which is a different thing, right? Virtually unknown beyond its members. No book had ever really hinted of it, though the deathless Chinaman said that there were double meanings in the legendary book that Lovecraft came up with, the Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Razed, which the initiated might read as they choose, especially the much-discussed couplet, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die," which describes the situation of Cthulhu in Relay, dead, dreaming, waiting to come back to life. So this is the human cult with, involving a few non-human creatures as well, as we saw with the Louisiana episode, aimed at ultimately bringing back the great old ones to their reign on Earth, which will displace human beings, but also, as we've read, perhaps if Castro's right, transform human beings as well, as the great old ones teach them new ways to revel. So the cult plays an incredibly important role within this narrative, and that's all that we learn about it from this particular story.